Hello and welcome to another episode of Technology and the Arts. My name is Brian Kelley,
And I'm John LeMasney.
and together we are going to explore the connections between technology and art. Apologies for the late hour and the the extra day, but we're finally here, and we are going to double up for tonight's show, even though we're going to try to keep this short. We'll go through things quickly. But since last week's experiment in doing a show with the two of us together in the same public place did not pan out, did not turn out very well at all. So this week we'll start out by revisiting last week's topic about the influence of technology on the creative process, and then we'll talk about the more direct roles and influences science and technology have on artistic works, which was the subject of an art exhibit that we covered in our first podcast, or actually our first two Technology and the Arts podcasts in December 2006 and January 2007. And that was an exhibit called Science as Muse, which was at the Montgomery Center for the Arts in where was that? I can't remember where that was. It was like near like Hillsborough and somewhere in Montgomery Township in New Jersey, just north of Princeton. But I'm not sure where it actually was in Montgomery Township, but it was the Montgomery Center for the Arts. Nonetheless, but before we get to that, John, it's good to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Brian. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. What you been up to?
Tonight I was giving a presentation, co-presenting actually, with Melissa Brisbane about Arduino and Raspberry Pi at Cherry Hill Public Library. It turns out that I'm not sure whether we talked about it, but I was published on Q Publishing about WordPress, a video series, and it turns out that I will be going back to Q Publishing to do another series on WordPress, this one an advanced WordPress series where we'll talk more about using plugins and using WordPress.org. And there might even be an opportunity for me to do a video series on Inkscape, which would be really nice.
Wow, excellent.
Yeah, so
you did talk about it last season, so yeah.
Yeah, and I was asked by my producer whether or not I had ever thought about doing a book, and I of course have done a few articles, but I've never been approached about a book, and I've always wanted to talk about personal branding and organizational branding and the exercises for that. So who knows? This could be a whole new series of things that I might be able to do. So I'm excited about all that. How about you?
Nothing much. No. Basically, I've been like thinking about my year of all my athletic activities, the triathlons and the long distance runs, and it's nice that this weekend I'm just going to be doing a nice easy 5K, but it's going to be an interesting one. It's XPN is having their first annual 5K, which is it's a benefit for musicians on call, which we talked about. I guess it was 2 weeks ago. I don't think it was last week's episode, but I guess no. I guess it was. Yeah, no, it was 2 weeks ago. It was for our community service one. So that's going to be interesting, and there's some music. There's actually I got an email about it going to the 10th anniversary of World Cafe Live. They offered, because I gave to this specific campaign a few years ago. They gave me free guest passes for a 10th anniversary concert that's taking place that afternoon. So I'm going to stay down there and see Mike Doty and Delta Spirit and this artist from Switzerland, the singer-songwriter who's just come around recently, Asgir, Aesgir, I believe is how it's spelled.
Mm-hmm.
but he had like this huge hit in Switzerland. Um, it's been he re-recorded it in English. So, oh, also I found out that the cover of Silver Horse, of Yoko Ono's Silver Horse, that I played accordion on with my friend Christian Beach, was supposed to come out today, and of course didn't. But now we're hearing November 4th is a possible release date, and actually the reason why this delay is that the label apparently reached an agreement with a distributor, and it's actually going to be in some stores. The CD will be in some stores rather than just through Main Man Music's website and through digital download. So,
congratulations.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I mean, it's not really anything for me, but and it's nice that this CD is going to get some additional distribution channels than we had expected when we recorded it. And real quick, since you probably couldn't make out what I was saying in last week's webcast, I just wanted to mention, we were talking about community service through art and technology last week, or 2 weeks ago, and I wanted to mention that I left out the ALS Ice Bucket Challenges, which kind of took a community service, and people use the technology and social media to perpetuate that and raise a ton of money for ALS, and it was really grassroots because ALS really had nothing to do with it at the start, and it just turned out that somebody who was social media savvy, had a reason to use ALS as the charity, and that's what gave it all that momentum, and that was all it needed to for celebrities to start doing it and really doing creative things with it, and so that's I just wanted to mention that it was an artistic piece with some of the creative things that were going on, and the technology with social media and YouTube and online video and the community aspect of it. So anyway, let's dive into our main topics for this episode. First, let's run through some of the things we talked about last week with the technology as a creative influence, and how technology can directly inspire or influence the creation of artistic works, and we've also talked about and how the need for features and creative applications influences community development, and something we talked about was just this very medium, podcasting or webcasting, and what we're doing right now is a direct result of technology, and given everybody a voice, and it's led to an entire genre and industry, and Chris Hardwick is probably one of the leaders of that, front and center. I mean, he's basically turned podcasting into an empire with his Nerdist Industries, and has his hands in film and TV and all sorts of things. So it's really amazing that the technology has allowed that to happen. And I don't know if you want to talk about Arduino and making, which is I have here on our on our script.
Sure. So as I said tonight, I was presenting a class on Arduino and Raspberry Pi, which are both two really great examples of making. And making, I think, is often misunderstood by the uninitiated. Making, in a nutshell, is the idea that it's not enough to take a product off the shelf. For example, my phone, right? So I have my nice Nexus 5 here, and I love it. I use it all the time. And I'm sitting here on my PC. It happens to be a Dell running Linux. Arduino and Linux are both open source operating systems. And the benefit of that is because they are open source and standards based, they have some flexibility in that they can become precisely what I want. I can go into the code and I can modify it to whatever degree that I want in order to create the solution that I want, as opposed to relying on somebody at some company somewhere coming up with a solution guessing at the solution that I want. I like that flexibility. But when it comes to hardware, this device, if I decide to try to take it apart, I'm stuck. I cannot modify to the degree that I want to this hardware. And so open source hardware is a solution for that. It essentially means that because I have, I don't have an Arduino here to show you, it's out in my car. With an Arduino, I get ports, I get pins that I can stick wires into and connect those wires with sensors and actuators so that I can make that device do something that my phone can't. I can, for example, insert a temperature sensor, or I can insert a GPS antenna, or I can insert LEDs, or I can insert a speaker, and based on whatever configuration I want, I can make my own solution to my own need. In other words, I can scratch my own itch. And that's a lot different than buying this phone at my local phone store and expecting that I will have the complete level of flexibility and customizability that I would have with an Arduino. I won't. Is it more work with an Arduino? Yeah. But the thing is that that extra work pays off in the sense that I have complete control over that device. How it relates to our topic is that my phone, when I pick it up, is not necessarily a creative influence comparative to Arduino. When I pick up an Arduino, it really asks me to be creative just by the nature of what that device is.
Right.
It doesn't do anything in and of itself. If I plug it in, it has no purpose. Whereas my phone, when I plug it in, it has a whole bunch of predetermined purposes, such as being able to make a phone call. The Arduino, without me scripting it, without me plugging in accoutrement, does not do anything. And the Raspberry Pi, less so. The Raspberry Pi, you install an operating system on it, and it's a $35 computer. But the expectation is that you would take it further, that you would plug in pins and connect it to a breadboard and then create a circuit that does something that I would not necessarily do with my CPU, with my desktop machine. Because the Raspberry Pi is $35, and I can set it to accomplish some project that I would not use up my more expensive desktop machine in order to do.
Right. So, I mean, that was basically, in a nutshell, what we talked about last week. I mean, I did mention, personally, it was because of GarageBand. I mean, musically, I'm not that good. I'm not that talented, but I always dabble with keyboards, and when I left my band, when Christian and I were working together back in the late '80s, early '90s, I left. I maybe tried writing a couple more years, but then I basically just gave up and didn't really touch any of my keyboards for about 10 years. And then 2005 or so, when Apple brought out GarageBand, I'm like, oh well, now here's like a cheap music production application. It doesn't have bells and whistles on it, but this would be kind of cool. Maybe I'll get a little cheap keyboard and use it as a MIDI controller and get back into music. And then I started writing again, and then that led to my reaching out and finding Christian through his blog and through his MySpace page, and finding out that he was basically he was just about to embark as a solo singer-songwriter after years of being in various bands that he fronted, and which were basically his projects anyway. I mean, the bands were just, you know, a vehicle for him to perform live, and I don't think, and you know, I just think he felt more. I think he felt more comfortable in the band setup as opposed to being, you know, Christian Beach, and but finally he broke free of that, and and so you know, and now I'm involved again in music and playing on records that take a year and a half to come out. But you know, that was very cool that the technology allowed me to get back into something that I used to love and be able to be creative again. So. All right, so let's move on to the second topic tonight, which was our main topic, the direct roles and influence science and technology have on artistic works. And it's a little different. You know, the other topic was about the influence on the creative process, how the technology helps to actually do the creation. Here, want to talk about more where the science and technology is actually visible in the finished work. When we started the Technology in the Arts podcast in December 2006, our first interview segment was with artists presenting at Central New Jersey art exhibit called Science's Muse, and it featured works of art directly influenced by science and technology. And, you know, like for example, Patricia Lay at that time was focusing on sculptures of heads, and she integrated cables and chips and other computer parts, motherboards, you know, whatever, into these sculptures, and they were very, you know, they were really cool. And I'll put a link in the show notes to some of those. And she was one of the artists presenting. Barbara Osterman, whose name we saw on a sign at Princeton Public Library last week. Her artwork is based on geometric shapes and principles. She does a lot with lines and space. And Jonathan Felshoe, who he was the first artist I interviewed for Technology in the Arts. He was the first interview I did, and famously or infamously had the microphone plugged into the wrong jack on my recorder, and the interview did not come out. And it was a great interview. But he, you know, started, you know, college as a...
And tradition has continued ever since.
Yes, yes. So he started in college as a physics major, I believe, or at least his training was in physics, and then he shifted gears to art, and he decided to combine both of those passions into his art. If you go on his website, you can see drawings and paintings of cosmic images, like different various different data sets of like visual representations of the universe, cosmic systems. He has some illustrations of the Large Hadron Collider, you know, and other computer visualizations of data, nuclear explosions, and weather systems. So, you know, there's art that's, you know, that's around us that you can see the science and technology in the art itself, and it's pretty cool. And that kind of goes into the you know, the STEM to STEAM aspect of it as well. You know, having you know, that art can have a place in the science and technology education sector. So and math. So you know, it's kind of cool when those things happen, because since we talk about technology in the arts, you know, those are things that are interesting to us, and it's cool when you see art that you know, that presents that to you. I see you have a couple of things here. What would you like to talk about?
I do. So this also relates to Arduino very directly because when I became involved with Artworks Trenton, part of the reason was because I had sort of a dream that I would put on a show there.
Was it an awesome dream?
No.
Uh,
I would put on a show there that uh, was an interactive, site-specific piece that made use of Arduinos and sensors in order to have the space create a display that reacted to the people in the space. So, for example, you might have floor plates where people would step in one particular area of the floor and certain things might light up, or certain actions might take place, or certain sounds might be heard. And we might have another area where, based on your presence, there might be an additional display. You know, if it was LEDs, or if it was sounds, or whatever the case might be. Or it might be something like a theremin, where, you know, based on your position in the room, the sound would change. Or based on the temperature in the room, the lights might change. And I still have a very strong feeling about this, that this should happen. I've never, I'm not saying that people are not doing it, I'm saying I personally have never walked into a space and had it so directly influenced by Arduino-based controllers. When I was an undergrad at University of the Arts, I tried to integrate technology pretty regularly into the work that I was doing and got a lot of resistance because of it. And I'm still not sure why, other than I felt like Dylan playing an electric guitar when everybody expected an acoustic.
right.
And I never felt really good about that. I always felt very ostracized for my want of using technology in art, and I guess that's why I have done so little analog art after leaving school. I'm not saying I dismissed it completely, but most of my work is not physical, traditional media work. Most of it is digital. It's design.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that's not my degree, that was a passion for me, and probably something that I should have pursued while I was in school, because a lot of it has been self-taught. One of the projects that stands out is a random generation project in which myself and a partner set up all these criteria that were quantitative in nature. So, for example, we would use a random number generator in order to determine a first step. And the first step would be which one of us would make the mark. And this was a two-dimensional piece. So the first roll would be for who would make the mark, and the second roll would be for what kind of a mark it would be, and the third roll would be for what the media would be, and the fourth roll would be for the portion of the piece that would have the mark placed in it, and the fifth roll would be from where to where, and the sixth roll, and so on. And we had all these really deliberate rolls that sometimes used 1,000 between 0 and 1,000 in order to indicate where a particular mark would go, for example. Or if we had 16 different kinds of media, it would be a 0 through or 1 through 16 roll, and so just rolling dice didn't really work. We needed an application that was easily allowed us to determine a number between 1 and 16, or 1 and 1,000, or 1 and a million, and created some really interesting work that was completely based in chaos. Because we really didn't have a lot to do with the creation of the work. The work was really being made by random numbers. And then finally there was, in my own personal work, a time when I was collaborating with somebody who lived in Albuquerque. And so the way that we worked together was I would create something in a particular application, and I would send it to this other person. They would work on it and send it back to me, and we were using email in order to do that. And at the time, this was the 1990s, it was innovative, because if we wanted to work in some other way, like we could have worked on a canvas, for example, and sent it back and forth through the mail. But because we were using email, it had to be digital.
Mm-hmm.
And that process allowed us to do something that we would not have done the same way if we were in the same space, and would not have done the same way if we were using traditional media. So as a result, technology played a very direct role in the end result of the work. It was highly influential in the end result.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes it's subtle, and you can't see it, and it's, like I said, I'm excited by that kind of art where the technology and the scientific aspects are present. I think, and I think that speaks to why we started this podcast back in 2006, that we had those, you know, shared interests. So, anything else?
Lots, but it's late, and
Yeah.
I apologize for that. But
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. I mean, it's we. Oh, of course. Now I've determined that I never updated the script at the end here, so I have no idea what What are we talking about next week?
you did. Just scroll down.
No, I did
What
not.
are we talking about next week?
Yes.
I do not know.
So
Next Monday night we're going to be discussing. No, yeah, you did not.
yeah, I didn't update it.
Oops.
So let me do a quick look. Oh, and there's 3 comments. Hopefully, those aren't too mean, considering that I think we're both basically going on fumes at this point.
At least it's feedback. Let's see. What are we talking about?
Oh, okay, all right. And again, it's kind of a kind of a related theme, but okay. So let's get back to the script here. Click on every window. Okay. I'll edit all this out for the audio podcast, so that's good. So that concludes this episode of Technology and the Arts. Thank you for joining us. Next Monday night, we're going to be discussing the Global Gallery, how technology has allowed artists to share their work and really collaborate on projects, you know, on a global scale, you know, through the internet. So that is what we are going to be discussing next week. We should be back on Monday night, unless something comes up. But in the meantime, you can stay up to date on the latest happenings with the show by visiting technologyandthearts.com, liking our Facebook page, visiting us at Google+, following us on Twitter at tech_arts. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and search for us via your favorite podcatcher. And of course, as always, we suggest iTunes, Pocket Cast, or Stitcher. And for all your personal or organizational technology and design needs, please visit LeMasney.com. Until next time, for Technology in the Arts, this is Brian Kelley.
And this is John LeMasney. Take care.